Commander Zixtar of the Xerelian scout vessel Luminous Path jolted awake as emergency klaxons blared throughout the ship. He rushed to the bridge, his four-fingered hands adjusting his ceremonial rank insignia, a habit from his academy days. "Report," he demanded, sliding into the command chair. Lieutenant Vexna, his sensor officer, frantically manipulated the holographic controls. "Unknown contact, sir. It breached defense grids 7, 4, and 2 in under 62 seconds. Impossible," Zixtar muttered, staring at the readout. The Coalition's defense grids were positioned parsecs apart. Nothing could move that fast without quantum displacement signatures. Sensor malfunction, it must be. "Running diagnostics now, but, sir, the anomaly is changing course. It's heading directly toward us." The tactical officer, a veteran of the Praxis subjugation, looked up from his station. "Sir, energy readings are. I've never seen anything like this. Either their power source is heavily shielded, or they're running on something we've never encountered." Zixtar's inner eyelids flickered, the Xerelian equivalent of a frown. The unified Galactic Coalition had encountered 17 spacefaring species over the last century. All had followed predictable technological development paths. All had been easily integrated into the Coalition's protective embrace. "Prepare first contact protocols," he ordered. "Standard dominance display, configuration 3. The crew responded with practiced efficiency, reconfiguring the Luminous Path's exterior illumination to highlight its weapon emplacements, while charging forward arrays to 30%. Enough to register on any scanning technology without constituting a direct threat. "Sir," Vexna's voice rose an octave. "The anomaly has vanished from sensors." Before Zixtar could respond, the ship violently lurched sideways. Emergency gravitational compensators whined as they struggled to adjust. The view screen automatically polarized as a massive shadow eclipsed their vessel. The unknown craft had appeared beside them with no warning. No quantum wake, no hyperspace window, no distortion field. It simply arrived. The vessel dwarfed the Luminous Path. Its hull was angular and asymmetrical, covered in what appeared to be battle scars and intentional armor plating. Most disturbing were the weapon emplacements, hundreds of them, varying in size and configuration, suggesting an arsenal designed to counter any conceivable threat. "Defensive protocols," Zixtar ordered, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Raise shields and—" "Sir, our shields aren't responding," the tactical officer reported, mandibles clicking in distress. "Something's interfering with our power distribution." "Communications are being accessed," Vexna added. "They're overriding our security protocols like they don't even exist." The main view screen flickered, security encryption dissolving like vapor, and a figure appeared. The alien was Bictal, with a hardened exoskeleton covering its torso and limbs. No, Zixtar realized with shock, not an exoskeleton. Artificial protection over soft tissue. Primitive, yet somehow more intimidating for its deliberate construction. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Nations Space Command Vessel Thunderchild," the alien said in perfect Xerelian, its mouth-forming sounds no non-Xerelian should be able to produce. "We noticed you've been tracking us. Perhaps we should talk." Zixtar stared at the screen, noting details with growing unease. The alien, this human, looked disconcertingly similar to Xerelian physiognomy, yet fundamentally wrong in subtle ways. Its eyes tracked everything simultaneously with unsettling precision. Its stance suggested both relaxation and readiness. Most disturbing was its expression, what Zixtar would later learn humans called a smile, but which reminded him of nothing so much as the apex predators of his homeworld before they struck. "I am Commander Zixtar of the Unified Galactic Coalition," he replied, falling back on diplomatic protocol. "Your vessel has entered protected space. Identify your species and point of origin." The human's expression shifted subtly. "We call ourselves humans. Earthborn, though that won't mean anything to you yet." She paused, head tilting slightly. Your protected space is new to us. We've been traveling these stars for centuries and never encountered your coalition." The implication sent a chill through Zixtar's spine. Either these humans were lying, or they had been moving through coalition territory, undetected for decades. Neither possibility was comforting. "We should meet properly," Captain Vasquez continued. "Your vessel or mine? Your choice, Commander." On the tactical display, new readings appeared. 4 smaller craft had deployed from the Thunderchild during their brief conversation, taking positions around the luminous path. The first contact protocols never mentioned what to do when you weren't the dominant species. The delegation chamber aboard the Thunderchild defied Cerulean expectations. Commander Zixtar had anticipated sterile, utilitarian spaces befitting a warship. Instead, the room featured hand-carved wooden panels, fabric wall coverings, and artifacts that appeared purely decorative, inefficient use of space that no military vessel should permit. "My apologies for the modest accommodations," Captain Vasquez said, gesturing to a conference table clearly modified to accommodate Cerulean physiology. "We didn't have much notice to prepare for visitors." Zixtar's cultural advisor, Dr. Neveris, leaned close. "The modifications to the furniture suggest they've been studying our biology in detail," she whispered. "Yet we've had no previous contact." "Please, be seated," Vasquez continued. "We've adjusted atmospheric composition for your comfort." The human captain wore what she'd described as a dress uniform, a severe black garment with metallic adornments that Zixtar now recognized as service medals. The symbolic communication was clear. This was both a diplomatic meeting and a military one. "Your vessel is impressive," Zixtar began cautiously. "The coalition would be interested in cultural exchange. We provide protection for developing species in return for reasonable resource contributions." Vasquez's expression shifted. Her lips curled upward, but her eyes narrowed slightly, a contradictory signal that triggered primitive warning responses in the Cerulean hindbrain. "That's fascinating," she replied, her tone pleasant yet somehow discordant. "Where we come from, protection rackets went out of fashion centuries ago." The translator implants stuttered over the term rackets, but the implication was clear enough to make Zixtar's aide bristle visibly. "You misunderstand," the aide interjected. "The coalition has brought peace to 17 species that would otherwise have destroyed themselves. Our guidance is essential," Vasquez supplied. "Mandatory? For their own good." She leaned forward, resting her arms on the table, exposing her wrists in what Zixtar would later learn was a deliberate show of apparent vulnerability that was anything but. "We've heard similar rhetoric in our history. It rarely ends well for anyone involved." Before Zixtar could formulate a response, an alarm chimed softly. A holographic display materialized above the table, showing the luminous path surrounded by 4 smaller human craft. "Don't mind the escort," Vasquez said casually. "Standard procedure when meeting new friends. You understand, I'm sure." The genuine warmth in her voice contrasted with the obvious tactical encirclement displayed above the table, creating a cognitive dissonance that left Zixtar momentarily speechless. "Perhaps we should discuss your species," he said finally. "Your technology suggests advanced capabilities, yet we've detected no quantum communications network, no hyperspace navigation beacons in this sector." Vasquez nodded. "We prefer self-sufficiency. Each vessel operates independently if needed." She touched a control, and the hologram shifted to show Earth, a swirling blue-white sphere. "Our homeworld is what astrophysicists might classify as a death world. High gravity, significant radiation, extreme climate variations, tectonic instability." Dr. Neveris leaned forward, professional curiosity overriding caution. "Yet you evolved sentience there. Fascinating. Most coalition species developed on stable worlds with minimal environmental threats." "That explains a lot," Vasquez said, her smile returning, this time reaching her eyes. "We evolved as pursuit predators, Doctor. Our ancestors chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We're physiologically designed to endure hardship. A junior officer entered the room, approaching Vasquez with practiced efficiency. He whispered something in her ear, a deliberate show of privacy. It instantly put the Xerelians on alert. "It seems your coalition superiors are concerned about our meeting," Vasquez said after the officer departed. "A battle group has altered course toward this system." Zixtar felt his throat sacs constrict. He'd sent no communication requesting reinforcements. Either the coalition was monitoring them more closely than he'd been told, or, "How do you know this?" he demanded. Vasquez's expression transformed entirely, her features hardening into something that no longer resembled the diplomatic mask she'd worn. For an instant, Zixtar glimpsed what humans truly were beneath their civility. "We have our methods, Commander. Now, shall we discuss how to avoid unnecessary unpleasantness when your battle group arrives? Or would you prefer a demonstration of why that might be in everyone's best interest?" The delegation chamber aboard the Thunderchild defied Xerelian expectations. Commander Zixtar had anticipated sterile, utilitarian spaces befitting a warship. Instead, the room featured hand-carved wooden panels, fabric wall coverings, and artifacts that appeared purely decorative, inefficient use of space that no military vessel should permit. "My apologies for the modest accommodations," Captain Vasquez said, gesturing to a conference table clearly modified to accommodate Xerelian physiology. "We didn't have much notice to prepare for visitors." Zixtar's cultural advisor, Dr. Neveris, leaned close. "The modifications to the furniture suggest they've been studying our biology in detail," she whispered. "Yet we've had no previous contact." "Please, be seated," Vasquez continued. "We've adjusted atmospheric composition for your comfort." The human captain wore what she described as a dress uniform, a severe black garment with metallic adornments that Zixtar now recognized as service medals. The symbolic communication was clear. This was both a diplomatic meeting and a military one. "Your vessel is impressive," Zixtar began cautiously. "The coalition would be interested in cultural exchange. We provide protection for developing species in return for reasonable resource contributions." Vasquez's expression shifted. Her lips curled upward, but her eyes narrowed slightly, a contradictory signal that triggered primitive warning responses in the Xerelian hindbrain. "That's fascinating," she replied, her tone pleasant yet somehow discordant. "Where we come from, protection rackets went out of fashion centuries ago." The translator implants stuttered over the term rackets, but the implication was clear enough to make Zixtar's aide bristle visibly. "You misunderstand," the aide interjected. "The coalition has brought peace to 17 species that would otherwise have destroyed themselves. Our guidance is essential," Vasquez supplied. "Mandatory. For their own good." She leaned forward, resting her arms on the table, exposing her wrists in what Zixtar would later learn was a deliberate show of apparent vulnerability that was anything but. "We've heard similar rhetoric in our history. It rarely ends well for anyone involved." Before Zixtar could formulate a response, an alarm chimed softly. A holographic display materialized above the table, showing the luminous path surrounded by 4 smaller human craft. "Don't mind the escort," Vasquez said casually. "Standard procedure when meeting new friends. You understand, I'm sure." The genuine warmth in her voice contrasted with the obvious tactical encirclement displayed above the table, creating a cognitive dissonance that left Zixtar momentarily speechless. "Perhaps we should discuss your species," he said finally. "Your technology suggests advanced capabilities, yet we've detected no quantum communications network, no hyperspace navigation beacons in this sector." Vasquez nodded. "We prefer self-sufficiency. Each vessel operates independently if needed." She touched a control, and the hologram shifted to show Earth, a swirling blue-white sphere. "Our homeworld is what astrophysicists might classify as a death world. High gravity, significant radiation, extreme climate variations, tectonic instability." Dr. Neveris leaned forward, professional curiosity overriding caution. Yet you evolved sentience there. Fascinating. Most coalition species developed on stable worlds with minimal environmental threats. That explains a lot, Vask said, her smile returning, this time reaching her eyes. We evolved as pursuit predators, Doctor. Our ancestors chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We're physiologically designed to endure hardship. A junior officer entered the room, approaching Vasquez with practiced efficiency. He whispered something in her ear, a deliberate show of privacy that instantly put the Xerelians on alert. It seems your coalition superiors are concerned about our meeting, Vask said after the officer departed. A battle group has altered course toward this system. Zixtar felt his throat sacs constrict. He'd sent no communication requesting reinforcements. Either the coalition was monitoring them more closely than he'd been told, or, how do you know this? He demanded. Vasquez's expression transformed entirely, her features hardening into something that no longer resembled the diplomatic mask she'd worn. For an instant, Zixtar glimpsed what humans truly were beneath their civility. We have our methods, Commander. Now shall we discuss how to avoid unnecessary unpleasantness when your battle group arrives? Or would you prefer a demonstration of why that might be in everyone's best interest? This is our combat training facility, Lieutenant Commander Sanjay Patil explained as the doors slid open to reveal a cavernous chamber. Commander Zixtar and his diplomatic team hesitated at the threshold. Inside, gravity itself seemed to bend and warp. Human crew members battled in 3 dimensions, some running along walls, others suspended in midair, locked in combat that blurred the line between choreographed dance and lethal efficiency. Variable gravity training. Patil continued, seemingly oblivious to the Xerelians' discomfort, prepares our personnel for combat in any environment. 0. High, unpredictable gravitational flux. Dr. Neveris edged closer to a transparent barrier separating them from the training area. These aren't simulations, she observed, inner eyelids fluttering rapidly. Your people are sustaining actual injuries. Patil nodded. Limited contact, yes. The medical nanites in their bloodstream repair minor damage immediately. He tapped his temple. Neural monitors ensure no permanent harm occurs. As if on cue, a female human slammed against the barrier directly in front of Neveris, blood streaming from her nose. The Xerelian scientist jumped back with a startled cry. The human combatant merely winked, wiped the blood away, and launched herself back into the fray. This way to engineering, Patil said, moving briskly down the corridor. The engineering deck presented fresh horrors. Crew members interfaced directly with machinery through neural links, their eyes rolled back showing only whites as their consciousness merged with the ship's systems. One technician's arm disappeared to the elbow inside a pulsing mass of what appeared to be living metal. Biomechanical interfaces, explained Chief Engineer Rodriguez, a diminutive human with burn scars covering one side of her face, allows direct communication between organic neural networks and chip systems. Such technology would kill most sentient species, Dr. Neveris whispered. The neural feedback alone. Rodriguez shrugged. We've adapted. Human nervous systems are remarkably plastic. She gestured to a massive cylindrical structure that dominated the center of the deck. Our primary reactor. Controlled quantum fission sustained by. An explosion ripped through a nearby conduit, sending superheated plasma jetting across the deck. The Xerelians scrambled backward in panic while the human engineers barely glanced up. A containment field snapped into place automatically, isolating the breach. Minor reactor fluctuation in Section 7, non-critical, Captain Vasquez's calm voice announced over the ship-wide communication system. Rodriguez continued her explanation without missing a beat, as if deadly plasma eruptions were too routine to acknowledge. Behind her, an emergency response team moved efficiently through the breach area. One technician's environment suit had partially melted to his skin, yet he continued working, applying sealant to the damaged conduit while a medic simultaneously treated his burns. How can he function with such injuries? Zixtar asked, unable to mask his horror. Pain suppression implants, Rodriguez explained, plus a healthy dose of what we call compartmentalization, mind over matter. The tour continued through hydroponics, where plants from 1,000 worlds grew in carefully controlled environments, many of them bearing warning symbols for toxicity. You cultivate poison? Zixtar asked as they passed a section marked with hazard indicators. Medicinal research mostly, Paddle replied, though some have culinary applications. Later, at a formal dinner, Zixtar watched in stunned silence as the humans casually consumed foods containing compounds that biochemical scans identified as potentially lethal to most species. Captain Vasquez sipped a dark liquid that registered as both a stimulant and a mild toxin. Is your entire existence always this intense? He finally asked, mandibles twitching with nervous energy. Lieutenant Commander Jackson laughed, a sound that somehow conveyed both genuine amusement and predatory satisfaction. This? He gestured around the elegant dining room. This is a vacation assignment. You should see our actual combat vessels. A chill ran through Zixtar's exoskeleton. You mean, the Thunderchild isn't a warship? Oh, it's a warship all right, Vasquez interjected, setting down her glass. Just not our primary combat class. The Thunderchild is a diplomatic vessel. Her smile returned, the Predator's expression that had so unsettled him during their first meeting. We thought it best to make first contact with something restrained. Admiral Krolvek stood on the command deck of the Inexorable Justice, flagship of the Coalition's 3rd Pacification Fleet. 30 capital ships arranged in standard intimidation formation exited hyperspace simultaneously, a display of coordinated power that had broken the will of countless species. Sensor sweep complete, Admiral, announced his tactical officer. We've located the Cerulean scout vessel. It appears intact but powered down. And the alien vessel? Krolvex demanded. Single large ship, approximately 2 kilometers in length. Energy signatures. Unusuals, sir. Krolvex snorted. Another primitive species stumbling into Coalition space. Broadcast the standard subjugation protocol. Class 3 intimidation display. A subordinate cleared her throat nervously. Sir, long-range sensors are detecting anomalies. The main view screen shifted, showing the space surrounding the unknown vessel. The fabric of reality itself seemed to ripple, like heat distortions above desert sand. Where empty space had been moments before, 5 new vessels materialize, not through hyperspace emergence or quantum tunneling, but through some unknown method that left no detectable signature. Impossible, whispered the science officer. They're manipulating space-time without a quantum field generator. Formation analysis, Krolvex ordered, his outer mandibles clicking rapidly, a sign of agitation he couldn't fully suppress. The tactical officer studied her displays with growing concern. They're arranging themselves in a pattern that... She paused, consulting with a xenobiologist. Sir, they're mimicking the hunting formation of apex predators from death worlds. Specifically, the ambush configuration used by pack hunters against larger prey. Krolvex hissed. They dared to consider us prey. Open a communication channel. The view screen shifted to show a dark-skinned human female wearing simple, unadorned attire, conspicuously lacking military insignia. I am Admiral Krolvex of the Unified Galactic Coalition, he declared. Your vessels have illegally entered protected space. You will power down weapons, submit to boarding, and accept Coalition authority, or face immediate destruction. The human's expression remained impassive. I am Dr. Maya Okafor, diplomatic attaché of the United Earth Government. We acknowledge your communication but reject your premise. Her voice was soft, yet carried unmistakable authority. Perhaps a brief educational exchange would benefit us both before we proceed further. Without waiting for permission, the transmission transformed into a 3-dimensional simulation that filled the command deck. The Coalition officers found themselves immersed in what appeared to be historical records. Earth's evolutionary timeline compressed into minutes. They watched, transfixed, as humans evolved not despite apocalyptic events, but because of them, adapting to ice ages, continental shifts, asteroid impacts, and atmospheric transformations that would have extinguished most species. The simulation accelerated through human history, showing tribes battling for survival, civilizations rising and falling, weapons evolving from stone to steel to atomic fire. Most disturbing was the segment showing humans surviving self-inflicted extinction events, nuclear wars, designer plagues, climate collapse, each time emerging stronger, their technology more advanced, their understanding of crisis management more refined. "We're not naturally warlike, Admiral," Dr. Okafor's voice explained as the simulation faded. "But we've never encountered a threat we couldn't adapt to overcome. Please don't become one." The casual delivery of this existential warning left several coalition officers visibly shaken. The tactical officer leaned close to Kralvex. "Sir, their weapon systems remain powered down. They don't even consider this a confrontation." Kralvex bristled. In 3 centuries of military service, he had never been treated with such dismissive confidence. "Weapons lock on the lead human vessel," he ordered. "Prepare to fire warning salvos." "Admiral," his second-in-command cautioned, "our scans indicate their hull composition includes elements we've never successfully stabilized. We cannot predict how our weapons will interact with." "I did not request analysis," Kralvex snapped. "I ordered weapons lock." The targeting computers struggled, reporting sporadic lock failures as the human vessels adjusted positions in seemingly random patterns. The more the coalition sensors focused on them, the more erratic their movements became. "Target the space between their vessels," Kralvex commanded. "A disciplinary barrage will demonstrate our seriousness." As the order transmitted through the fleet, Dr. Okafor's expression changed for the first time, a subtle softening that somehow conveyed disappointment rather than fear. "That," she said quietly, "would be unwise." "Fire," Admiral Kralvex ordered. 30 coalition warships discharged their forward batteries simultaneously, lighting up the void with coruscating energy. The disciplinary barrage, carefully calculated to miss the human vessels while demonstrating overwhelming firepower, sliced through space toward the Phi ships. What happened next defied the laws of physics as the coalition understood them. The human vessels moved, not with the lumbering directional shifts of massive warships, but with the fluid grace of living organisms. They twisted, rotated, and realigned in 3 dimensions, flowing around the energy barrages as if space itself bent to accommodate their passage. "Tactical analysis," Kralvex demanded, mandibles clicking rapidly. "Unknown maneuvering technology," his officer responded, voice cracking. "They're executing course changes that should tear their hulls apart. Acceleration forces would liquefy any organic crew." On the command deck view screen, Dr. Okafor's expression hadn't changed. "Perhaps a more direct approach to communication would be beneficial," she suggested. The main tactical display flickered, then transformed. Suddenly, detailed schematics of every coalition vessel appeared, including the inexorable Justice itself. Critical systems were highlighted, vulnerabilities marked, optimal firing solutions calculated with precision that the coalition's best military AI couldn't match. Most disturbing were the casualty projections, exact numbers of expected deaths for each vessel based on where weapons fire would impact, down to individual crew quarters and duty stations. These calculations took our tactical eye approximately 0.3 seconds to complete, Dr. Okafor explained. Her voice now transmitted directly to the secured command channel that should have been impenetrable. "We could have fired in the next 0.1 seconds, but instead we spent a full 5 minutes composing this message, hoping you'd choose diplomacy over demonstration." Kralvex stood frozen, his exoskeleton suddenly feeling too tight. "How did you access our secure channels?" he managed finally. Okafor smiled, the expression somehow more unsettling than any threat. "Your encryption is based on quantum entanglement principles. We mastered those 2 centuries ago." Admiral, the security officer interrupted urgently. We're detecting anomalies throughout the fleet. Small objects, no larger than insects, have bypassed our shields and attached to critical systems. The view screen split, showing microscopic devices of incredible complexity adhering to weapon systems across multiple ships. Those are our diplomatic envoys, Okafor continued pleasantly. They're currently disabling your weapons with the minimum possible damage. The secondary units attached to your life support systems are merely a precaution. They'll only activate if you attempt to override the primary units. A subordinate approached Kralvex, holding a datapad with trembling hands. Sir, weapon systems throughout the fleet are going offline. The micro-devices are not damaging the hardware. They're rewriting the control software. Purge all systems, Kralvex ordered. Emergency protocols. I wouldn't recommend that, Okafor cautioned. The secondary units are programmed to interpret such actions as hostile intent. Kralvex's second-in-command stepped forward. Sir, we should consider diplomatic options. These humans have displayed capabilities beyond our understanding. They could have destroyed us already. The Admiral's pride warred with his tactical sense. 3 centuries of military service had taught him to recognize when he was outmatched, a rare experience, but not unprecedented. What was unprecedented was the manner of the defeat, not through superior firepower or numbers, but through technological sophistication so advanced it bordered on the incomprehensible. We value life, Admiral, Okafor said into the silence, her voice gentler now. Especially yours. Your species and ours have much to offer one another. Shall we discuss terms now? On his private command console, data began streaming. Detailed analyses of human civilization, their governmental structures, their scientific achievements. The humans weren't just offering peace, they were offering knowledge. Stand down all remaining weapons, Kralvex ordered finally. Open diplomatic channels. As the coalition fleet powered down, the 5 human vessels reconfigured their formation, no longer mimicking predators stalking prey, but forming a symmetrical pattern that somehow conveyed both protection and welcome. A wise decision, Admiral, Okafor nodded. I believe this is the beginning of a productive relationship between our peoples. Kralvex wasn't sure if he'd just prevented a massacre or witnessed the most elegant conquest in galactic history. The neutral space station, Harmonious Exchange, hummed with activity as representatives from 17 coalition species gathered to meet the human delegation. The massive habitat ring, originally designed for interspecies trade, had been hastily repurposed for the most significant diplomatic event in coalition history. Dr. Maya Okafor led the human contingent, 12 specialists chosen to represent Earth's diverse regions and disciplines. They moved through the station with measured confidence, seemingly unconcerned by being surrounded by thousands of aliens. In the central auditorium, a Xerelian anthropologist named Calaveras delivered his findings to the Coalition High Command. Holographic displays showed human historical records, meticulously verified by cross-referencing thousands of sources. Their history is disturbing, Calaveras explained, mandibles twitching nervously. Humans fought their most brutal wars against themselves. Their planet has no unified predator species that might have united them against a common threat. Instead, they competed primarily with each other. The display shifted to show Earth's world wars, conflicts of such devastating scale that several coalition representatives physically recoiled. You willingly show us your atrocities, asked a Xerelian cultural attaché when the presentation concluded. Dr. Okafor stepped forward, her expression serene. We show you our journey, she corrected. The path matters as much as the destination. In another section of the station, coalition military observers watched in horrified fascination as human tactical officers ran simulation exercises. The scenarios presented impossible choices, situations where victory required accepting significant casualties. Your strategic doctrine prioritizes mission success over personnel survival, asked General Trazel of the Praxis Armada. Lieutenant Commander Jackson nodded. When necessary, We call it acceptable losses, a calculus we prefer to avoid but never shy away from. Such thinking is alien to us, Trazol admitted. Coalition species evolved with strong preservation instincts. Our tactical doctrine prioritizes minimizing casualties above all else. Jackson considered this. That explains your weapons design philosophy. Non-lethal whenever possible. His expression darkened. It also explains why you subjugate rather than destroy. Your species can't imagine fighting to mutual annihilation, so you assume others can't either. The general's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of profound discomfort. You would prefer destruction to subjugation. Every time, Jackson replied without hesitation. It's wired into us. Live free or die isn't just a slogan. It's a neurological imperative. The breakthrough in understanding came not in military discussions or political negotiations, but during a cultural exchange exhibition. A coalition musician, a Melisandre with 12 specialized appendages designed for sound manipulation, attempted to play a human violin. Despite having more dexterous limbs and superior auditory processing, she failed repeatedly while humans patiently encouraged her efforts. I don't understand, she admitted finally. The instrument appears simple, yet I cannot produce the correct resonance. A human musician took the violin, demonstrating proper technique. It was designed for hands that evolved to both create and destroy, he explained. The same fingers that draw beauty from these strings can just as easily pull triggers or perform surgery. We contain multitudes. This demonstration of human duality, creative and destructive potential housed in the same form, sparked something unexpected among the coalition representatives. Genuine admiration. Later that evening, representatives from the Praxis, Solanthi, and Vexlori, species whose planets had been peacefully integrated into the coalition centuries earlier, approached the human delegation privately. Your people possess technology we cannot match, the Praxis elder said quietly. But more importantly, you possess the will to use it in defense of independence. Would humanity consider advocacy on behalf of formerly sovereign worlds? Dr. Okafor studied the three representatives carefully. You're asking us to help you break away from the coalition. We're asking if humans truly believe in self-determination, the Solanthi representative clarified, or if your words about freedom are merely another form of cultural posturing. Captain Vasquez, who had remained silent throughout much of the diplomatic proceedings, stepped forward. This is the first interstellar ethical dilemma humanity has faced, she said, her expression thoughtful. Do we maintain peace with the coalition, or champion justice for its unwilling members? The human delegation withdrew to consider their response, leaving the coalition on the brink of its first legitimate existential crisis in 1,000 years. 6 months after first contact, representatives from 23 species gathered on Earth's orbital diplomatic station Unity. The gleaming structure, constructed in record time specifically for this occasion, reflected humanity's commitment to the new galactic concord that would replace the coalition's hierarchy with a federation of equals. Admiral Elena Vasquez, her captain's insignia replaced by the gold stars of flag rank, surveyed the assembly chamber with quiet satisfaction. The journey from first contact to this moment had required equal measures of military preparedness and diplomatic restraint. They're still arguing about the sovereignty clause, Dr. Okafor said, joining her at the observation window. Vasquez nodded. They would be. The concept is revolutionary to them. Below, representatives debated the founding charter, particularly Article II, which guaranteed the right of any member world to withdraw from the Concord without repercussion. For species evolved from herd animals with strict dominance hierarchies, the concept bordered on existential terror. Will the Cerealian High Command accept the final terms? Vasquez asked quietly. They don't see an alternative, Okafor replied. Our passive monitoring networks went online throughout their territory last month. They know we can observe their military movements without detection. The monitoring network had been humanity's masterstroke. not weapons of mass destruction or displays of military might, but a web of quantum-entangled sensors that rendered coalition space transparent to human observation. The message was clear. Aggression would be futile because it could never achieve surprise. The diplomatic proceedings were interrupted by a commotion at the chamber's entrance. Security personnel surrounded several Xerelians wearing the distinctive garb of the evolutionary purist faction, a separatist group opposed to any accommodation with lesser species. Vasquez's enhanced senses detected the threat before anyone else. Subtle bulges beneath ceremonial robes, micro-expressions of fanatic determination, the distinctive odor of weaponized compounds. "Down," she shouted, already in motion as the separatists drew disruptor pistols from concealed holsters. What happened next became the stuff of galactic legend. Witnesses would later speak in hushed tones of how Admiral Vasquez neutralized 6 armed assailants using nothing but a ceremonial serving tray and a writing implement. Her movements blurred beyond the visual processing capacity of most species, each strike precisely calculated to incapacitate without killing. Within 12 seconds, all 6 would-be assassins lay immobilized on the chamber floor. Without pausing, Vasquez tore medical supplies from an emergency kit and began treating the wounded, both her allies and the separatists who had just tried to kill her. "Pressure here," she ordered a stunned Xerelian diplomat, guiding his hands to a compatriot's wound. "Keep it elevated." Blood streamed down her face from a disruptor graze, yet she moved with methodical efficiency, stabilizing the critically injured before medical teams arrived. Threat elimination and preservation of life are not mutually exclusive, she explained afterward to assembled representatives, bandaging her own wounds while her uniform still bore the evidence of violence. This is the essence of the human condition. The attempted assassination, rather than derailing the peace process, became its catalyst. Species that had evolved complex social hierarchies to avoid violence found themselves faced with a paradox. The most dangerous predators in known space were also the most committed to preservation of life. At the signing ceremony 3 days later, the Xerelian High Commander, his right arm still in a regeneration sleeve after the attack, approached Admiral Vasquez with the question that had haunted coalition leadership. "How can humans forgive those who once threatened them?" he asked. "Your capacity for violence exceeds any species we've encountered, yet you choose cooperation when domination is clearly within your capability." Vasquez considered her response carefully, aware that her words would be enshrined in Concord records. "The universe has been trying to kill us since we crawled from our evolutionary cradle," she said finally. "We learned long ago that converting adversaries into allies is not merely ethical, it's efficient. Today's enemy may hold tomorrow's solution." As the ceremony concluded, a Praxis observer captured the sentiment spreading throughout civilized space. The true shock of humanity isn't their capacity for violence, it's their capacity to choose peace despite being masters of war. The human warship that had so terrified Commander Zixtar now orbited peacefully above a Xerelian colony world, its weapons dormant, its shuttles delivering medical supplies and educational materials. The vessel's name had been changed from Thunderchild to Cooperation, a symbolic gesture that nonetheless conveyed humanity's most fundamental truth. They had not evolved beyond violence, they had simply learned to value its alternatives.